American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. Hurricane Michael has made landfall on the Florida Panhandle in or near Panama City Beach. Fox News reporter Rick Leventhal is there.
And there are a lot of trees out here. Some of them have come down, and many more likely will come down. The rain is pelting us up, and the wind is still very strong here. It's whipping us from multiple directions. It's again tough to see how bad the damages are, and we have no idea, no way of knowing. Well, no one will know until this gets past us. But based on what we've seen so far and the strength of these gusts, there's no doubt going to be a lot of cleaning up to do.
Hurricane Michael is not the only storm forecasters are watching. Fortunately, the National Hurricane Center says Hurricane Leslie and Tropical Storm Nadine are far off in the Atlantic Ocean and no threat to land. As for Tropical Storm Sergio, that's expected to hit Mexico's Baja California Peninsula before dumping heavy rains in Texas and the Ozarks over the weekend. FBI Director Christopher Wray is commenting on the investigation into sexual assault claims against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Fox's Rachel Sutherland reports from Washington.
FBI Director Christopher Wray told the Senate Homeland Security Committee the supplemental background investigation into Justice Kavanaugh was specific and limited in scope at the direction of the White House.
My folks have assured me that the usual process was followed.
Wray declined questions on specific written instructions from the White House and counsel Don McGahn.
The communications occurred between the White House's Office of Security and the FBI Security Division.
Some Democrats have called the investigation a sham. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
President Trump is going after Democrats on health care, calling the party unhinged. Fox's John Decker.
President Trump, in an op-ed published in USA Today, is stepping up his attack on Democrats over a health care proposal called Medicare for All, claiming it would end Medicare as we know it and take away benefits that seniors have paid for their entire lives. The plan, pushed by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, would expand Medicare to cover almost everyone in the country, and current Medicare recipients would get improved benefits. Republicans contend that the proposal would cost too much for taxpayers and argue it marks an extreme overreach by the federal government.
A transgender bathroom policy may have led to an incident in Georgia where it's alleged that a kindergartner was sexually assaulted by a transgender boy in a school bathroom. As AFN's Bob Kellogg reports, so far, the school has done nothing about it.
Alliance Defending Freedom has filed a lawsuit against the school on behalf of the 5-year-old girl. ADF attorney Christiana Holcomb says school officials have not only not changed the policy or removed the alleged perpetrator from school, she reports they have actually turned against the plaintiff's family
for reporting the sexual assault. And it actually called the Georgia Division of Family and Child Services to investigate the little girl's family.
ADF says the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has announced it is going to investigate this situation.
We're grateful that the Department of Education is open to an investigation, and we're hopeful that they will take disciplinary action against the Decatur school system.
Holcomb says Superintendent David Dude and the school board were repeatedly warned that the policy would unacceptably inflict the loss of privacy and safety for girls. I'm Bob Kellogg.
And federal investigators insist a search in the wilds of Pennsylvania for a legendary cache of Civil War gold came up empty, but the treasure hunters who led FBI agents to the site believe that's not the case. Dennis and Ken Pareda spent years combing part of the Pennsylvania wilderness with high-end metal detectors, drills, and other tools to prospect for a fabled cache of Civil War gold. Federal agents found nothing in a dig last March at a site about 135 miles northeast of Pittsburgh, but neighbors insist there have been late-night excavations and FBI convoys. The Paredes, who say they were embarrassed, are challenging the FBI's account of the dig and insist their gear picked up something.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We must create an international progressive community that stands for social, economic, racial, and religious justice for all.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy.
Oh, you're not going to use the mob word here.
It's totally a mob. It is without a doubt. There's no other word for it.
It is up to us to rededicate ourselves to the traditions and wisdom of our founders. And it is up to us to renew the bonds of love, loyalty, and affection that link us all together as one great American family.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the program here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. What an interesting development. We have a new word to add to our lexicon of words we're not allowed to actually say. We have to use their initials. That word is mob. If you're triggered right now, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to say the M word. Mob, 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 mob. Got to say it. Welcome to the show. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Please do remember to hit the subscribe button over at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Find those Facebook pages too. You can also select See First. And if you're not already seeing a whole bunch of other stuff first, you can see our content first, see information about our shows. My Facebook page is Stacy on the Right. You can see information there that I post stories and videos and also the live stream of the show. If you miss it, you can also find the podcast at those same websites. Welcome to the program today. We have a wonderful hour here for you. We're going to be going through Rand Paul talking about the possibility of the violence that's being called for by Cory Booker and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, that violence might escalate into an assassination. And his fear is very real after surviving 2 attacks, not one, but 2 attacks on his own person by leftists who are inflamed because they are no longer in power. And rather than wait out the 4 years, as we did when Barack Obama was in his first term, they're unhinged. And the idea that the Republicans dare to govern from the right is just so anathema to them that the people are losing their minds. So we're going to talk about that. We have Benny Johnson, who's a reporter for the Daily Caller. He's going to join us today to talk about MSNBC's youth voters thingamajiggy that they're doing. So we'll talk about that with him. And we'll take your calls. Of course, the call lines are 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Today's daily confession is, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. It's Proverbs 2:6. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. And this one is a go-to, Proverbs 2:6, because we know that we can hear from God directly in his scripture. And if we keep our eyes trained on what God has said to us and walk in obedience, then we can definitely experience the fullness that he has for us in this life. Doesn't mean we won't have troubles, but it does mean that we have an advocate, the ultimate advocate, working on our behalf, and we can be comfortable in that knowledge. And it is a comfort, especially as we watch the devolution of what is our social contract here in America. The idea that you can protest and you can voice your concerns and you can address yourself to your government has turned into run them out of restaurants, run them out of public spaces, get in their faces, make them listen. If they bring a knife, you bring a gun. This is the new political reality. I'd love to see Democrats repudiate this and dial it back. But since the talking heads and mouthpieces of the Democrats over at CNN won't do it, I don't expect to see it from their elected officials. And that's what brought Rand Paul to the point where he was talking about the possibility of an assassination. Now, remember, Rand Paul was at the baseball mound when the crazed Bernie Sanders supporter came through with a semi-automatic long gun and shot up the baseball field, severely, critically wounding Steve Scalise, the majority whip. He barely got past with his life. It was prayer and fantastic surgeons who saved him, multiple gunshot wounds to the abdomen. And he's, alive to live and tell the story. Rand Paul, five people were wounded that day. Rand Paul was there. And then he was also attacked after that by his neighbor, who was a deranged lunatic, who is now a convicted felon for his assault on Rand Paul, broke 6 of his ribs. He suffered through multiple bouts of pneumonia in his attempt to recuperate. And he's back at it. He's back working again. But his wife, they've received so many threats that she actually penned an op-ed to Cory Booker asking him to stop calling for violence. And she now sleeps with a loaded firearm next to her bed because she's just concerned that, that at any moment they can be attacked in their own home. Is that what we really want? And why don't we see the same thing from people on the right side of the political spectrum? Where are the mobs of angry people on the right? Where were they during the Obama years, running people out of restaurants, refusing to serve people, refusing to do business with people? Where were they? Oh, yeah, that's right. They weren't there. So all of the stories about violence from the Tea Party were just that, stories, made up farces, just exercises in empty rhetoric. But here we are. We literally have actual mobs descending upon locales in Washington, D.C., and we have people making excuses about it. So here's Rand Paul. He's talking about this whipping up of dangerous people who don't know when to stop. It's number 5.
I think what people need to realize that when people like Cory Booker say get up in their face, he may think that that's okay, but what he doesn't realize is that for about every 1,000 person that might want to get up in your face, one of them is going to be unstable enough to commit violence. When I was at the ball field and Steve Scalise was nearly killed, the guy shooting up the ball field and shooting, I think 5 or 6 people were shot. Steve Scalise was almost killed. He was yelling, "This is for health care." He had a list in his pocket of conservative Republicans that he wanted to kill. When I was attacked in my yard and had 6 of my ribs broken, pneumonia, lung contusion, all of that, these are people that are unstable, and we don't want to encourage them. We have to somehow ratchet it down and say we're not encouraging that violence is ever okay, ever a reason for or a means for trying to resolve things. I feel that there's going to be an assassination. I really worry that someone is going to be killed, and that those who are ratcheting up the conversation, those who are ratcheting up saying get in their face, they have to realize that they bear some responsibility if this elevates to violence.
But they're already cleaning it up. So Rand Paul may make fantastic points there. He certainly does. But they're already saying, well, these aren't mobs. Because that's this is what happens when people who have no allegiance to the truth are allowed to get behind a microphone or in front of a camera and speak to multiple hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in total per week, when they have no conscience, no allegiance to the truth. They don't even know that they would know the truth if it hit them upside the head with a 2x4. If the truth was a 2x4, they wouldn't know it. They'd say, nothing just hit me. I've never been hit before, because they're unable to process the truth, which is people using their fingernails to claw at a wood door and screaming and wailing and howling like dogs. That's a mob. People directing traffic, standing in the middle of the street and threatening people who don't go the direction they tell them to when they're in their car to go the other direction. That's a mob. People actually following people and saying you're an old white man and accosting them and banging their hands and their whatever they have in their hands on their car, attempting to destroy their private property and running them out of public spaces. That is a mob. Mob, mob, mob. I said it a whole bunch of times. Now what? The thought police may have control of MSNBC and CNN, but they don't have control of this, Mike. And I encourage you, start asking. I know you're supporting certain candidates. You're supporting certain causes. You want to see certain things done in Washington, D.C. But are you okay with me as a person being run out of a public space? Are you okay with that person over there, just that stranger right there, standing up and coming over here and screaming in your face until you get up and leave. It's all well and good when it's somebody else. I notice people get the deer in the headlights and they're just looking. You can see the people in the background when this stuff is going on. Innocent bystanders are kind of looking like, what do I do? And the person who's being assaulted is just trying to get away. But what happens when that person turns around and strikes back? What happens when that person truly fears for their life because there are 6 of these mob violent protesters and there's only one of them and they decide to stand their ground? What happens when people really start taking these threats of violence and these physical altercations, they start taking them seriously and begin to defend themselves? Then what? And the time to ask that question is now, before someone is seriously injured. It's bad enough you had the pro-abortion protester kicking a pro-life lady in the face. He was arrested. He's been charged. Some Lilliputian protester with, Daisy Dukes and a white T-shirt on, dancing around and literally smacking the signs out of an older white gentleman's hands when he was there to protest just like she was. She was protesting against Kavanaugh. He was there protesting for Kavanaugh. She knocked the sign out of his hand. She was also arrested for assault. Remember, battery is unwanted touching. Your hand or body part goes on to the other person and they didn't want it to, that's battery. And that's when you open the door to other escalating charges. And this is serious business. We're talking about felonious assault in many of these cases. You're kicking someone in the head. That's not just battery right there. That's assault with intent to kill. Foot to the head. You're trying to kill somebody. And these people have been lulled into a sense that, well, it's just, it's okay if we're upset. We're not getting justice. They're doing things in Washington, D.C. that we don't like. And therefore, we can kick people. We can push them. We can get in their faces. We can prevent them from getting on elevators. We can prevent them from getting in their cars. We can pull them out of their cars. We can jump up and down on their cars. You see how far it's going? And then for people who are saying, well, I'm an independent, you're voting for the Democrats. I know there are genuine independents out there, but the majority of the people who say they're independents are really just Democratic voters who are ashamed of what they see that is happening in the party, and so they just don't want to claim it. Come on over leave the dark side. Leave the side of the mob, the angry, disgusting, unwashed, violent, stinky mob. Leave them. You don't have to be there. So here's Senator Rand Paul. He wraps up his concerns here, and it's worth listening to and saving in the podcast and sharing with friends because he's telling the truth here. It's number 6.
This is sort of the double standard. If it's an accusation with no substantiation, it's utterly to be believed. In my case, it wasn't an accusation. I actually was assaulted. He's now a convicted felon. There is an instability and a violent nature in this man. There still is a risk of him committing further violence, and yet the media discounted that completely because they don't like my politics. So this just shows you that it's about politics. It really isn't about concern or people wanting to lessen violence. There's all kinds of violence out there, and if the media doesn't want to condemn it when it happens to a Republican, you can see what a double standard we have.
And so when someone's actually attacked and put into the hospital, ribs broken, literally on breathing apparatus and had to have surgery and all of that, that's boo-hoo Rand Paul. That's what a lot of activists on the left said. Boo-hoo Rand Paul. Not a lot of sympathy. Didn't see talking heads having a moment of silence, or it just was, we just need to cover this up. We just need to find a reason why this happened. Obviously, it happened because it's their fault. So we also have today on the show, Hillary says civility has no place while Republicans are in power. In order for us to have a return to civility, Democrats have to be in power again. Do you see what she's saying there? She's saying if you want peace and stability and you want the rule of law, we have to be in charge. If we're not in charge, we're going to tear this thing up. We're going to tear it up. We're going to burn it down. We're going to do things to make sure you're uncomfortable until you put us back in power. Don't take it from me. I'm going to give you the audio of her saying it herself. She's back. She's in a house coat and she's inciting more violence. Please explain to me how you could support that. Anyone. How do you support Hillary Clinton when she says things like that? We'll be back with Benny Johnson right after this. Stay there.
You're listening to Share-a-thon 2018 here on Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family came into my life at a point where I was really wanting to be more of a Christian who engaged with the culture and could be able to filter on what was happening around me with a biblical worldview. It's been such a tool for discipleship for me, something that I can come to every morning and just glean truth and glean wisdom. And I really, really sincerely appreciate every single show and every person on there. It's actually been helpful for me and my family as well. And please support this ministry and continue to give to this awesome ministry that God is using. Thank you so much.
Let's impact even more lives. Partner with us for our 3-day Share-a-thon starting Tuesday, October 16th here on listener-supported Urban Family Talk.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I knew a young man who grew up in a godly home. It was a wonderful Christian family. The teen years were great for his siblings, but not for him. You see, this friend of mine was somewhat of a prodigal, and he rebelled against his parents and their authority. He broke all the rules of the household. He was miserable in those years because he spent most of his time on restriction, discipline for his rebellion and disobedience. Our choices and decisions create our realities, and they produce consequences. In Nehemiah chapter 9, verses 35 and 36, we find Nehemiah's prayer of confession after an incredible revival breaks out when they read the Word of God, coming on the heels of rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. They're reminded of the terrible legacy of disobedience that has accompanied these people, and they verbalize this to God in prayer. Listen to verse 35. But they, meaning their forefathers, in their own kingdoms, enjoying your great goodness which you gave them, with the broad and rich land which you did set before them, did not serve you or turn from their evil deeds. Behold, we are slaves today, and as to the land which you gave to our fathers to eat of its fruit and its bounty, behold, we are slaves on it. What a description. He's saying, you know, we have disregarded our spiritual responsibility. We did not serve God. We didn't turn from our evil deeds, and now the land of freedom became a legacy of bondage. Is your land of freedom a legacy of bondage? Are you a prisoner in the promised land? Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Freedom is a product of responsibility. When we choose what is right, then we experience His favor and great blessing. What's it going to be for you? Blessing or prison?
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Benny Johnson. He's a reporter for the Daily Caller. Thank you so much, Benny, for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Stacey. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. I'm wanting to know about your piece over at the Daily Caller, the MSNBC youth voters. What's going on?
Well, yeah, so Democrats, I think, are looking for a silver lining somewhere, anywhere that they can find it. I think it's a very scary time to be a Democrat. You're losing a lot of major political battles. You're seeing a lot of voters swing to the right after the Kavanaugh debacle. That was a clear loss in the Democratic column. And you're seeing some major trends upward for Republicans in the electoral ballot. So MSNBC went and talked to youth voters. And you always hear about the youth vote. And they went and talked with youth voters in California, one of the largest schools in the state. And the reporters couldn't get a single student to say that, one, they were going to vote, or two, that they even cared at all about the major Democratic talking points of the day, Kavanaugh, the Russian investigation. So it was a little extra bad news for a party that's already seen quite a boatload of it.
Okay, so and I've said this for a while, and Benny, I know you're a reporter, so you're coming at this from, you have your neutral perspective. You obviously have your own personal perspective, but for you, the story is the story. But for me, since I'm Stacy on the Right and I'm out there, with my political views out in front of me, I've been saying that if you push it too far, either side of the political aisle, but specifically in this case, the Democrats, if they go too far with the Kavanaugh accusations, which they did, they went to gang rape, and that was just a no-go, and people were justifiably horrified. And also now with the protests where you have Hillary Clinton lambasting the Republicans and saying they only understand raw power, and if they want civility, then Democrats have to be in charge. And now you have Eric Holder saying when they go low, we kick them. You know, do you think it's part of that as well, that people are naturally repulsed by the tendency to violence that's being displayed?
Right. The violent tendencies, as much as they try to pin on President Trump, are clearly in the Democratic column. You're exactly right, Eric Holder. This just broke that he said that Michelle Obama was flawed and incorrect in her thinking that when they go low, we go high. He fact-checked, weirdly, the First Lady. He was also the Attorney General under the Obama administration, which is the number one law enforcement official in the entire country. And then he's saying that you should kick people when they're down. It's a very, very odd thing to say, particularly when the candidate who he served ran on the message of hope and change. It's very, very odd. It's not very positive, I think, for Democrats right now. The American public, what we've seen at the caller, and I was right in the middle of the protest. I was standing in the middle of the protest for days and days and days, and I really desperately needed a shower after that.
I know you did, man.
Spending as much time around leftist protesters. Boy, they were violent. They were getting arrested. They were assaulting cops. They were assaulting senators. They were screaming and yelling and wishing violence on people. And the American public does not like that. It's not a mob rule country. This is not a mob rule country. And they're clearly responding at the polls, Stacey.
Okay, so first of all, I just, God bless you, Benny Johnson, for going and spending more than 10 minutes in the presence of those protesters. I already start off the show by saying they were stinky and mean and angry and stinky. And so I did said it twice on purpose. And I just can't tolerate that. So I grew up in Germany where deodorant usage is optional. And so you could get into the elevator and someone could get in the elevator with you. And if they weren't wearing a deodorant, meaning they didn't ever wear it, because it's one thing to go one day, to miss it for one day and to forget. It's another thing to never wear it and never have that protection that it begins to build up over years and years and years of use. That's the whole thing with hygiene. You have to keep doing it. And so you'd be ready to faint when they get out of the elevator. You just ride up 3 floors with them and you're literally almost passed out. And so for people who aren't into hygiene and then they're in large groups and they're angry and they're producing that anger hormone, which ratchets everything up, I can't imagine what you've been through. I'm hoping you're going to be up for some kind of award for spending time there. Can we just talk for a second? Because, it's time for adult chat now. What happens in these stand your ground states where people are heavily armed and these protesters start, 5, 6 of them, they like to tag team an individual, an older person, a woman, people who have kids in the car. They like to, attack them in groups. They swarm you. They're not afraid to physically assault you. What happens when someone stands their ground? What happens when someone says, my car is a part of my castle doctrine according to the law of the state, and I'm going to defend it. My kids are in here. What happens then?
I think that's best probably left to the legal experts. I certainly don't want to theorize about something that could be a deadly interaction. I will say this, Stacey, that talking with members of Congress on the Hill, talking with senators, talking with people who work in their staffs very closely. I've spent 10 years in Washington reporting. I will tell you this: It is a common knowledge that eventually things are going to go too far, and someone's going to get very badly hurt. Of course, someone's already been hurt.
Yeah.
Keith Scalise was shot by a progressive who loaded his gun, scoped out a baseball field, and asked if these are GOP members of Congress before pumping bullets into them. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that would have been a massacre with multiple members of Congress dead, were it not for Scalise having armed guards, because no one else was armed. They were sitting ducks. And that entire situation with James Hotchkiss, his law has been deleted from the public zeitgeist, from the media digest. It's been completely whitewashed away from history, and so you don't have the context of how radicalized the left is becoming. And it's a very scary precedent. And I do believe that this could eventually boil over into people being very, very badly hurt. Again, it already has, and people on the Hill are just waiting for it to get worse.
so when you talk about people on the Hill, and you did mention Rand Paul, he also was assaulted at his home, mowing the grass, 6 broken ribs, multiple hospitalizations. He had suffered through pneumonia because of the, as a side effect of his injuries multiple times. His wife now sleeps with a loaded gun next to the bed. And the expectation is that someone's going to be killed. And so I just happened to be, looking at some video, and I saw Allison Camerata, I think it might have been one of the others, on CNN, literally covering her face with her hands at, Matt Lewis using the word mob to describe these people. How are we at a place where people can't admit that a mob is a mob?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It's a very important question, and it's a question that I don't think people are asking correctly. My personal opinion, and it was Brooke Baldwin who did that.
Yeah.
Brooke Baldwin couldn't tolerate it being called a mob. But as someone who stood amongst them, as someone who's been covering them for 3 weeks and almost on a daily basis, covering their activities or physically being among the groups of people that were roaming Capitol Hill, screaming at senators, hosting protests, getting arrested en masse. It was every bit of a mob. It was the literal definition of a mob. I believe what happens is that CNN, because you saw this happen with multiple hosts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to say the word mob. You're not allowed to call them a mob at CNN. Those orders came down from on high, from PR and Jeff Zucker. And so CNN tells their anchors, don't let anyone call this a mob. It makes them look bad.
Mm.
And then all the hosts are forced to have to play this hilarious invisibility game where they cover their eyes and they, if they can't see it, it's not there. It's crazy. And you've seen this on multiple, you've seen CNN do this multiple times, which is why I believe that the network is propaganda for the left. It really does come off as propaganda for the left if you watch it with a critical eye now. And so it really is a lack of an acceptance of fact. And as someone who stood there and watched the arrests happening, someone who stood there and saw the assaults happening, as someone who was personally threatened multiple times when I was up filming them and who was surrounded and yelled at and screamed at and watched the same thing happen to my colleague, I have a message for CNN. This was a damn mob.
So when you talk about being there, because your firsthand account to me is utterly credible, and ultimately it's the record that we want is from people who were there, who took the time to go and be in the midst of these people and kind of report from the ground. And you're right about the CNN propaganda. It just never stops. I mean, just when you think they can't go any lower, they're like, oh, yes, we can. We're going lower. Just watch. When we look at that, and I know you started off by talking about how voters seem to be very, very, they're becoming deactivated on the left because it's just too much. But, I mean, what really happens in November in some of these congressional races? I know the polls have swung a little bit, and it's not quite as bad for the Republicans when they're looking at their poll numbers in these battleground races. But do you think it'll be enough because we still have a month left?
Well, I personally believe that there's a ton of room for error by Republicans. Republicans have not shown to be closers in situations like this, so we'll see. But the president is hitting the battleground states hard. He's doing one campaign event every single day this week. We'll see if the hurricane gets in the way of that schedule, but he is on schedule. The president just announced that he is on schedule to go to a campaign event this evening. And when the president goes somewhere and tells people to vote, listen, they really do turn out. And we've seen the GOP win a lot of close races and special elections where the president has jumped on board, and he seems to be really wanting to keep the House and really, really wanting to keep the Senate. Lucky for the president, this Kavanaugh was a gift that keeps on giving. The Kavanaugh debate is something that soured the mood of national Democrats, that soured the mood of national independents, and it boistered the mood of Republicans. And so you're seeing people like Martha McSally, who was down by double digits, Martha McSally in Arizona, who was down by double digits, now just clobbering Kristen Sinema. Flipped the script entirely. Flipped the script. You're seeing double-digit leads explode for
Yes,
Blackburn,
yes.
Floating with a double-digit, and in North Dakota, of course, Heidi Heitkamp, she's just toast. So we'll see how it works out in the end. You're right. There's a lot of time between now and Election Day, but for Republicans, it is looking very, very good.
Okay, so what do you see happening? Because I was really surprised to see that people hung around for the first day of the court opening up. I haven't had a chance to look today to see if they have any fresh video of people clawing at the doors, but are people still protesting Associate Justice Kavanaugh, or have they gone home?
Quite the video. Quite the video. Yeah, geez, listen, like, what are you going to do, by the way, like, when you get the doors open? What are you going to, you're going to go up and you're going to punch him? What are you going to do? You're going to take his robe, take his gavel? What would you do if you'd opened the doors? By the way, also, Stacey, I live in D.C. I spent a lot of time at the Supreme Court. Those are 13-ton bronze doors. They're ceremonial doors. They do not open with any regularity. I've never seen them open in a decade of covering Supreme Court events. I've never seen those doors open, not once. And so I don't know what they were really intending on doing, but you're not going to paw. You kind of look like little kittens. You're not going to paw 13-ton bronze doors open. And they're also like 25 feet tall.
Their little hands. The hands were so small. When I watched the video, I was like, look at those cute little hands, like just scraping.
Yeah, I don't exactly. I do really truly wonder, like, if that's what they're going to storm the gates with, this is going to be a very short battle. The truth is that I just have, I have no idea what's gotten a hold of the left. It's clearly a rabid Trump derangement syndrome. It's not working well for them. It's not working out great. Their entire party is sort of like a body that has been taken over by the host, and the crazy zombie host has taken it over and made it insane. And they're trying to rein it in and get control of it, but they've just the Democratic Party has just lost control of their narrative and of their voters, and it's showing at the polls.
I hope that people are just looking at it and really assessing whether or not they're voting for the policies or they're voting because, it can be an identity, being a Democrat, being a Republican. It can be an identity instead of saying, I'm with you as long as you're with these particular policies. The minute you leave those policies, I'm out. And then it would be much more logical to try to show them, look, we don't agree with this. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today and for your work, the hard labor that you just put in, virtuous works, hanging out with the mob, and the reporting that's so fantastic. Benny, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you again soon. That's Benny Johnson, reporter for the Daily Caller. He really has been in the trenches for 10 years solid, reporting from Washington, D.C., and some of the best reporting out there. I've been so pleased to see him join the Daily Caller and their wonderful staff there. So it's really wonderful. I want to give you guys this other piece that I have. It just stacks up on top of the information that we were just discussing with Benny Johnson. And that is this. This is breaking news. Eric Holder, as Benny described, former chief law enforcement officer of the entire country, said, when they go low, we kick them. And then, of course, let's not forget Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, who refused to say that it's wrong to run people out of restaurants. And so when I thought Benny's answer was very, very, it was a good answer because he didn't want to wade into legal issues. But the fact is, the law supports self-defense. And as we heard just a snippet of audio yesterday from Fox News where, you had people discussing what happened to Brian Kilmeade. And as the discussion turned, the people who are best equipped to defend themselves are going to win in every situation. It is simply best to stop this madness. But it has to come from the top. The people who incited the violence have to now take it back, or they get to be responsible as well for what happens. Okay, when we come back, we're going to take your calls, 866-963-2037, here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
St. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the Word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the Word, why do we think that we can get along without the Word? The Bible says, "Study to show thyself approved." Equip yourself with the Word daily and watch your response to Satan's foolishness change. One of my coworkers, Pastor Joseph Parker, teaches that it's good to read at least 3 chapters a day. Sounds good to me. Today is a good day to start. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about, or beatboxing, or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on urbanfamilytalk.com.
Donald Trump's America. About a month away from a critical vote in American politics, Vice President Mike Pence levies a significant accusation.
China is meddling in America's democracy.
The vice president's remarks came at a D.C. think tank and doubled down on President Trump's United Nations allegation of last month that China wants to aid his opposition. How are they doing it? The vice president says intelligence leaders tell him
China is targeting U.S. state and local governments and officials to exploit any divisions between federal and local levels on policy.
China denies these claims, but the administration insists China is using trade tariffs to advance Beijing's influence. The vice president says the U.S. wants to ensure trade practices
that are free, fair, and reciprocal, and we will continue to stand and demand that they do.
Vice President Pence says China's rogue tactics are worse than what the Russians have tried to do. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again. But until then, the only thing that the Republicans seem to recognize and respect is strength.
Okay, Hillary, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your candor. Appreciate you. Yeah, all right. At what point does someone tell her that the craziness has to stop? She was speaking at, one of those outdoor gatherings where she walks up onto the stage and there's all this really cool hip music, like she's a rock star. And she comes out strolling, doing her thing. And the rest of us are just left to listen to her spout off this garbage. And what I want is for her to come to the light. She's been in politics too long. She's had death threats herself. She's had Secret Service protection, for a very, very long time. Very long time. And she also served as a senator, and she served as our Secretary of State. So this is someone who ought to know better. All right, we'll take your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Let's go to Nicole in Texas. Nicole, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, what's your comment?
Well, I just wanted to comment on the conversation earlier that I know the country is divided right now. I normally am a little middle of the road on everything, but I do lean left, and I believe both parties are not innocent. Both parties have done some wrongful things. But I was a little offended by the previous conversation because I don't want to be lumped in with the mob mentality population. I'm not prone to violence, and I am a hygienic person.
Well, I can appreciate that. The comments about the lack of hygiene are about the actual protesters who are there, and Benny Johnson was actually verifying that because he was there as well. I guess I wonder, when you say both sides are complicit, are you saying that both sides engage in mob violence, or are you saying that both sides incite violence or speak violent rhetoric to their constituents?
Oh, no, I just mean in general. I think that both parties have issues and have made some.
Oh, okay. We lost her, but I think she was saying both parties have issues and have made some mistakes. And I have to say, I wouldn't characterize both parties as being in the same tier with that, but of course we've seen bad behavior on the part of Republicans at times in the past, and I think there have been times when Democrat individuals who are elected officials have been very strong on condemning violence, and so it's not a blanket statement. But at this point, right now, we only have other people adding to the calls for violence. We don't have anyone repudiating it. In fact, it's interesting that these people are making these statements. Nancy Pelosi hasn't said much at all. And that's interesting that because she was one of the first people to come out after Maxine Waters said, drive them out of public spaces. And she said, that's not us. That's not what we believe in. We're not a mob. We don't believe in running people out of public. But then Schumer came out and kind of said something similar. And then a little bit of time passed by and Maxine Waters went right back to calling for violence, and they didn't repudiate her again. I don't get that. So let's go to Van in Arizona or Arkansas. Van in Arkansas. Thank you so much for calling the show.
Oh, it's a common mistake. You're fine. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
I just appreciate your position and your honesty. That's what I enjoy listening to your show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Here's a question I have. And, I've listened to, the other talk show people on the other stations, in addition to listening to you mostly. But with everything that, like, Maxine Waters is saying, Hillary, and so forth, I don't hear any of the talk show hosts or any of our leaders on the Republican side throwing the word terroristic threatening out there. And when they're calling for mob, when they're calling for getting in people's face, is that not terroristic?
Criminal terrorism definition. So I'm looking it up to see if there's one. Terrorism is a systematic use of terror, often violent, especially as a means of coercion. Yeah, it kind of fits that, doesn't it? I just wanted to make sure I was on the right definition. I mean,
it seems to be like it does. And I mean, when 9/11 rolled around and when we had all of those events happen, I mean, we had a whole series of laws that were brought into place to deal with that, but yet our politicians are seemingly, to me, ignoring it. And, I mean, I think if you want to simmer it down, just start charging a few people with that and see how quick it slows down, I would think. I don't know. It's just one of those inquiring minds want to know things.
Well, you know what, Van? I got to say, I know one thing gets people's attention, and that's the use of the word terrorism. And that's why in past there have been people who've maybe overused the term and it kind of lost its punch. But it's still one of those terms that if you see the word terrorism on a newspaper or you hear it in a news story on TV or the radio, you stop what you're doing so you can hear what's going on. And this is a story that really, Benny Johnson said that it's not getting the traction it should. It's not only not getting the traction it should, there's been no acknowledgement by talking heads on the left that this is what's happening, that people are really being violent. I would not object to them applying that term to what's going on and then charging people, because you're right, the best deterrent is enforcement. Fantastic. Thank you for calling the show today, Van. Appreciate your call. Let's also go to Reed in Texas. Reed, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Hi, Stacey. First, I want to say thank you for your service as a fellow vet. It's always good to talk to another one.
Thank you for your service as well.
You asked a question. Thanks. You asked a question of one of your guests a little while ago about what's going to happen when one of these groups or mobs comes down and starts trying to badger or assault a conservative down here. I'm going to tell you somebody's going to get hurt, and it's probably going to be somebody in that mob. As a proud Texan, I am a concealed carry person, and I've got my carry on me 24/7, or pretty much, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
These people they're out of control, and I was just having this conversation with my daughter. These people that are reacting to what our representatives are telling them, they're going to lead to dark times in the future of our country if this isn't stopped real soon.
It reminds me of remember Reed back in, this is in the 70s, so a lot of people won't remember this, but there were that Bernadine Dorn and Bill Ayers, they were like setting bombs, and there were like 2,300 bombs that were set off over the course of a couple of years all around the United States because they were upset about, Democrats not winning and that type of stuff. Do you think they'll start going there? I mean, it's so unsettling to see the behavior and that people on the left aren't acknowledging it or calling it out and saying it's wrong. Do you think they escalate from here and go? Because I don't see them winning a lot in November. I know the polls don't agree with me, but I just don't see it.
I'm with you. I don't see the blue wave that they're talking about, especially after this fiasco with Kavanaugh, who I thank God that we got confirmed. Mm-hmm. But it would not surprise me at all to see this escalate and I like to laugh at Facebook for all the funny things on there, but as one comment on there states, the conservatives are the sides with all the guns. So they'd be kind of stupid to start an open civil revolt or civil war. So I would expect that if they're going to start something, it's going to be more of a terroristic style attacks across this country.
Well, we got to pray that that's not the case. But I appreciate your call, and I agree with you that it's like a ticking time bomb, and I don't want to see it. I don't want to see this be the new America. Thank you, Reed. Appreciate your call. And let me see. On time, we're okay. Randy in Louisiana. Thank you so much for calling the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, good to hear some new voices on AFR. Thanks for not putting me on call block. Serious. I've been put on call block, and one of them was by AFR. I got into an argument with somebody. They started crying, and they got their feelings hurt and everything. And I was trying to tell them the truth. They didn't want to hear it, And that's the problems with the Christians. They want to pick and choose certain things, but they need to fight everything. Anyway, my point is, as far as I can see, the Democrats and the Republicans have been playing off of each other probably ever since the Federal Reserve got started back in 1913, and they've been causing these. Well, the banking system too. They've been causing these recessions, depressions, and everything in between to keep the people, off balance. And if finally somebody gets in office that's really, he's not Republican or Democrat, he's an independent. And he's like a Tea Party independent. He doesn't take, he's for the people. And this is what has the Republicans and the Democrats upset. And who's the Supreme Court judge?
Judge Kavanaugh.
That died?
No,
not Kavanaugh.
Scalia. Scalia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, put it this way. And you can hang up if you want, but I'm going to tell you this is the way I look at it. The Soroses, the CIA, the FBI, the Bushes, the Clintons, and the Obamas, and the Muslims, he got murdered, as far as I'm concerned. And this is the results of having him murdered. We ended up with Kavanaugh. And it's their own fault. And they're not going to stop at it either. Somebody called for the assassination of Kavanaugh, I believe. Well, I bet that's on the table, and not just him. And I pray for these people every day for their protection.
Me too. I think we should all. Oh, sure. Thank you, Randy, for calling and for your comments. I don't know about the list of people that he named off having anything to do with Justice Scalia passing away. I've read a lot of the stories online about people, with different things that they've said about that. I will say we had an opportunity to interview one of Justice Scalia's sons about the book Scalia Speaks that they produced. It's a book of the speeches of Justice Antonin Scalia, and I recommend it to you highly. He's spoken to so many organizations. So of course, Justice Scalia was a Catholic, practicing Catholic, and pretty devout Catholic actually. But he spoke to a lot of different groups, and he spoke to Jewish groups. He would, anyone wanted him to come and speak, he would. And so he would go and his speeches, it's really a peek into just how fascinating it can be to have someone like that who has been sitting on the Supreme Court for decades come and speak to your group and what they would choose to speak about. And so I recommend the book. It's called Scalia Speaks. And his son came on and spoke to us about it, and it was a really good interview. I think it was about a year and a half ago when it was I'd say maybe 6 months after he passed away, possibly, that the book came out, and it's a wonderful tribute to their father. And I don't know about the rest of that. I do agree that what we must do is commit ourselves to praying for a return to normalcy, for the plans of the enemy to be thwarted, for justice to be released upon our land, for a fresh wind of revival to blow through, for God to show himself strong. His eyes are continually roving the earth, searching for a righteous man that he can show himself strong in, that one of us would be that man, and that through our prayers, we would be able to see him deliver us, because he can. And he will, if we humble ourselves and cry out. He will answer. That much I do know. So if you're leaving us now, good night from the Heartland. If you're staying with us, you have news and information from onenewsnow.com. Stay right there.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. For Panama City Beach proper, the worst has passed. That's according to news outlets on the ground in Panama City Beach covering Hurricane Michael. The Category 4 hurricane made landfall this afternoon with winds of around 155 miles per hour. Fox News reporter Rick Leventhal was a guest on Shepard Smith reporting.
We're still getting buffeted by some pretty high winds. I had my wind meter out and clocked a gust at over 50 miles an hour, and then the little plastic cover came off, and I went to pick it up, and it just took off like a bullet that way. So that's gone. It's the way stuff flies around out here in this wind. But I'll tell you what, we do see a utility pole that came down and a couple of trees, but what's remarkable to me is how many trees are still standing. I mean, look at the forest beyond me. Most of the trees are still up. So, obviously that's great. We do see some sign damage, some minor damages here, and I guess, we'll get a better look at it when the worst of this is over.
Earlier today, Florida Governor Rick Scott said help would be offered as soon as things calm down.
We will have a massive wave of response and support coming down and around the Panhandle. We'll have more than 1,000 search and rescue personnel deploying immediately after Michael passes. We now have 3,500 National Guard members activated and staged.
According to USA Today, the last time the Florida Panhandle had a major hurricane of Category 3, 4, or 5 make landfall was 1950. The operator of the limo company at the center of a deadly crash investigation in upstate New York has been arrested. Here's Fox's Gernal Scott.
New York State Police said in a release that Nauman Hussein was taken into custody after a traffic stop near Albany. It's not known why he was pulled over or if it had anything to do with the Saturday limo crash that killed 20 people. Hussein runs Prestige Limousine, which operated the 2001 Ford Excursion limo. Police say that car failed an inspection in August, and its driver did not have the proper license to be behind the wheel. The cause of the crash is still being sought by state and federal investigators. Services for some of the crash victims will be held later this week and early next week. In New York City, Gernal Scott, Fox News.
A public policy analyst believes it is quite possible President Trump intends to fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, probably after the midterm elections. AFN's Chad Gerning reports.
Rosenstein accompanied President Trump aboard Air Force One on a trip to Florida, an indication that at least for now his job is safe. The president addressed reporters prior to leaving the White House on that trip.
We're going to be talking. We'll be talking on the plane. I actually have a good relationship other than there's been no collusion, folks, no collusion. And but I have a very good relationship. We'll see. No, I don't. No.
Abraham Hamilton III is general counsel and public policy analyst for the American Family Association. He says President Trump saying he would rather not fire Rosenstein is not a commitment not to fire him.
I think he's indicating that he feels that Rosenstein could be forcing his hand when he speaks to reporters about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump. It really communicates the fact that you have somebody working in your administration who is openly working against you.
So Hamilton believes that ultimately Rosenstein will be out.
It could be something that could extend beyond the midterm elections. I think that President Trump may be reluctant to pull the trigger on such a move prior to the midterm elections. And so I think that is what we may be seeing happening.
And Hamilton says we will see a very different operation at the DOJ if Rosenstein is replaced by current Solicitor General Noel Francisco.
So I think you'll hear the squawking, the gnashing of teeth if Rosenstein is fired, because the regressives in Congress and Washington and all over the country do not want to see Deputy Attorney General Francisco.
I'm Chad Groening.
In final news this hour, if you're in need of a job this Christmas season, America's retailers and shipping companies may be a good place to look. Due to the tightening labor market, more businesses are offering full-time hours, higher pay, and even bonuses.
Y'all have encouraged us to go out, stand for the Word of God, stand politically.
It's truly a blessing to hear how God is using Urban Family Talk.
Just want to say I love everything that Urban Family does.
Will you take a moment to share your story? Call 877-327-5647. That's 877-327-5647. Thanks.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We must create an international progressive community that stands for social, economic, racial, and religious justice for all.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy.
Oh, you're not going to use the mob word here.
It's totally a mob. It is without a doubt. There's no other word for it.
It is up to us to rededicate ourselves to the traditions and wisdom of our founders. And it is up to us to renew the bonds of love, loyalty, and affection that link us all together as one great American family.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here today. I so enjoy that we get to have callers on the show and that people come on and share their opinions with us. And so we're really grateful for that. I'm also super grateful that next week is Share-a-thon. And so I just want to ask you as listeners to prayerfully consider partnering with us so that we can keep this fantastic live radio that comes direct to you without very much of it's the commercials that fund commercial radio. But for us here at Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio, it's the listeners. You're listener supported. And so think of it in the same way that you think of your favorite contemporary music stations that sing the Christian music and bring you all of the fantastic new Christian artists. And those are listener supported, and they have partnership that they request twice a year the same way that we do. It's the same situation. And we are so blessed to be on the radio. We're so blessed to be with you. And we need you to partner with us so that we can continue to do that. And it brings you, instead of commercials over the break, you have, teaching and preaching and information about what we're doing here. So and you have more minutes of content per hour than you do on commercial radio. And so if you listen to the podcast on commercial radio, you notice how short an hour is without the commercials. With ours, it's a longer amount of content, more content per hour that you get. So just pointing that out and asking you guys to think about next week. We're going to be having Share-a-thon for 3 days, Tuesday through Thursday. I will actually be doing that from here. We actually have family obligations that I need to travel for after Share-a-thon, so I will not be traveling to Tupelo for Share-a-thon, but it'll still be the same fantastic program. And so I can't wait to get to that. Right now, I want to talk to you about Hour 2. So we're in Hour 2 of the program. Last hour, we spoke to Benny Johnson of the Daily Caller. This hour, we're going to speak to Lauren Enriquez, frequent guest of the program. She's from Human Coalition. She's going to come on and talk to us about the Gosnell movie. And, the left has already tried to make it seem as if this is just a failure. And, of course, they don't want the truth to come out about what's going on in the country, safe, legal, and rare out the window. But there's a lot to know and understand about it. And the Gosnell movie is something that we need to support it. If we're going to walk the talk, we got to support it. So she'll come on and talk to us about that news of the day. Right now, you got Hillary Clinton saying Republicans only understand power. And, so we heard her say that there's no way you get civility unless they're in charge. But here she is talking about how Republicans only understand power is number 2.
You heard how the Republican members, led by Mitch McConnell, the president, really demeaned the confirmation process, insulted and attacked not only Dr. Ford, but women who were speaking out. Look, I remember Republican operatives shutting down the voting in Florida in 2000. I remember the swift voting of John Kerry.
He deserved it.
I remember the things that even the Republican Party did to John McCain in 2000. I remember what they did to me for 25 years. The falsehoods, the lies, which unfortunately people believe because the Republicans have put a lot of time, money, and effort in promoting them. So when you're dealing with an ideological party that is driven by the lust for power that is funded by corporate interests who want a government that does its bidding. It's hard. You can be civil, but you can't overcome what they intend to do unless you win elections.
So let me get this straight. All of the information about, starting with Whitewater in Arkansas and going all the way up to present day, all that information about the malfeasance of the Clintons is a fabrication by the Republicans? Do you hear the propaganda that is coming out of this chick's mouth? It's lies. It's corporate interests funding the Republicans. If they got George Soros, hundreds of organizations funded by George Soros, and those are the organizations that pay these protesters, these mobsters, to come around and crack heads and destroy public property. And it's the Republicans who are to blame for the fact that Americans think badly of Hillary Clinton. You know, if she'd just stay gone for a little bit, if she'd just take a year off, people would probably start liking her again. You know how that is. Out of sight, out of mind. You start to, you know, kind of whitewash the historical record. And then before you know it, you're like, she's not so bad. As long as the person stays out of sight, you're like, not so bad. No, I'm not saying I would feel that way. But generally speaking, most Americans the presidential approval ratings go up after the president leaves office. The ratings go up because people kind of get nostalgic and they miss them. And they don't remember the bad parts. They just remember the good parts. Thank God that he made us that way, because otherwise we'd always be mad. We just wouldn't be able to get over anything. So I mentioned to you that you've got Brooke Baldwin on CNN getting totally triggered when this conservative guest, it was Matt Lewis, uses the M word on air. Check this out. It's number 4.
Nothing that happened, last week is going to matter to the person who's already upset about all the other things Donald Trump has done. Democrats were motivated, passionate, angry. Sure. They are either going to turn out or they're not. Republicans, they're the team that needed the excitement, the passion, the energy. They didn't have it. In midterms, that's what matters for turnout, and now I think they do. And it's because I believe it's the overreaction of the left. When you see people like Ted Cruz getting chased out of restaurants by a mob.
You're not going to use the mob word
here.
here.
It's totally a mob. It is without a doubt. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's a go watch. Put up the video.
Mob. Stop.
Put up the video.
A mob is what we saw in Charlottesville, Virginia, 2 August ago.
No,
a mob is not what we saw chasing. I'm not saying what they did was right.
What about the people who were at the Supreme Court banging on the walls? What do you call that? Civil protest? Or is that a mob? I think it's easily a mob.
Yeah, and if it were Tea Partiers, we'd call it a mob for sure. Come on, let's be serious.
And you know they would. Oh, come on. The Tea Party people would clean up the venue where they had their event. It'd be so spotless. It looked better than it was before they came with the rally. When the Tea Party used to have events, they would literally come in and they'd have all the porta potties, the permits, everything, lights, stage. They'd do the thing, and then people would go through and they'd comb the area for any trash and they'd clean it all up and put it into the trash receptacle, some of which had to be hauled away off-site. And that's just the way it was. And I can't tell you how many Tea Party rallies I went to, how many protests I went to where people came, and if there was any trash on the street when they were getting ready to leave the protest, they would take it. No signs left behind, no dirty tissues, no water bottles, nothing. Not only were they not violent, they were neat freaks. So I just just bringing up the Tea Party in the same sentence as what we're seeing now is so unacceptable. So what I want to do now is I think we should be praying for the safety of our elected officials. And that's all of them. Obviously, I don't see a lot of Democrats being threatened right now, but all of them, we need to pray for their safety. And I want the same way that we committed ourselves to pray for Judge Kavanaugh and his family when we sat down to our meals, I want to continue to have these people, these elected officials, these people who we've placed in authority over us through our through our consent of the governed, we still have to be willing to acknowledge these people they need prayer. They need us to pray for them. And they need us to spend our time when we go to the Lord in prayer to include them in what we're praying about. So, there's a lot of scripture that is available for us to pray over them. Praying for those who are elected in authority over us is a requirement. The Bible tells us to do it. And look, what happens is we get upset and we get angry, and I'm right there with you. We see the rhetoric from Cory Booker and Maxine Waters, and we know that's wrong. But we have to pray for these people so that our hearts aren't hardened and we don't become, we begin on the same path to becoming like them. We have to stay where our hearts have to stay soft, and we have to stay sweetly willing to pray for them. And it's hard. I mean, this isn't what I wrote on the show sheet because I definitely feel like we should pray for Cory Booker, but we have to. The Bible says in 1 Timothy 2:2, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. Pray this way. The New Living Translation says, pray this way for kings and all who are in authority, so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. Now, so what do we see? We see a lack of godliness and a lack of dignity out of those who are on the political left, the activist part. And I appreciate the call, first hour, from the young woman who called in and said she leans to the left and she believes in hygiene and she's not prone to violence and she doesn't condone it. I appreciate that. And I know there are many, many others out there like that, like her. And so she and I may not agree politically, but I totally concur with her that people like her exist and that it's not everybody. But there are enough protesters and enough people saying things that are unhinged that we do have an atmosphere of fear and recrimination and a lot of people feeling like something bad is imminent. And that is the fight or flight response, and it's accurate. So it's not, I'm not discounting that. I'm not taking back anything I said before, but I'm acknowledging her phone call and that there are other people out there who believe, they're on the left, they're in the middle, and they don't believe in the violence, and they're repulsed by it as well. But I would say if you are someone who voted for Maxine Waters, or if you're living in a district of someone like Cory Booker and you hear what he's saying, that's when you get on the phone and call his office, and you call his office in D.C., and you leave a message and you say, I'm a constituent and I voted for you. Stop calling for violence. They get enough phone calls like that, they'll realize, okay, maybe we've gone too far. Anyone can do it. I am in no way saying that a Republican can't go too far, that President Trump can't go too far. Any person, if you're alive and walking and kicking and breathing, you can go too far. The question is, if you go too far, are you willing to say, you know what, I went too far? If you go too far, are you willing to say, you know what, I need to pray for some repentance and I need to stop saying things like that? If you're not a religious person, which I'm not sure about Cory Booker's religious leanings, how about just, I went too far? I got to take that back. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I want to win. I don't like what's going on, but I don't want anybody to get hurt. I'll take it. I'll take any of that. I'm sure I'm not alone in that either. In some ways, it's really good because I'm Stacey on the right. I don't want a whole lot of Democrats winning in November. I don't want them to stop the president's agenda. I don't want them gumming up the works for what we have that is going so well for us here in this country. And speaking of that, I'm going to give you a list of the fantastic things the 115th Congress has been able to accomplish. Water infrastructure. Answer the president's call to address the nation's water infrastructure by authorizing the Army Corps to construct, expedite, modify, or study more than 100 water resource projects. And more. I have a whole list here, and it's lengthy. So stay there. We'll be back with Lauren Enriquez right after this.
You guys are truly an asset to the radio waves in Memphis, Tennessee. We appreciate having you guys speak truth. And I know that you guys honestly are trying to be led by the Holy Spirit. If we call Satan's tactics and his agenda out clearly, you guys provide good resources for us to better equip ourselves to walk in Christ. And you guys are just a true asset. Thank you for doing the things that you guys do, but also even just adding truth to the African American community in a time of chaos and in a time of uncertainty. You guys take us right back to the Bible, which is the only true and certain entity in this present world. And so we thank you.
Pray for God's blessing on our upcoming Share-a-thon so that we can continue to make a difference. Share-a-thon begins Tuesday, October 16th, here on listener-supported Urban Family Talk.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Last month, I quoted from Victor Davis Hanson's article on the origins of our Second Civil War. One of his explanations focused on our college campuses, and his insightful analysis is worth more than a few sentences I devoted to it a month ago. He argues that higher education helped split the country in two. For example, college campuses competed for scarcer students by styling themselves as Club Med-type resorts. This included upscale dorms with phenomenal buffets and lavish gyms. In fact, everything a student might want was right there on the campus. This not only increased the cost of college, but shielded them from the realities of the outside world. They graduated with massive student loan debt and headed out into the world as snowflakes. At the same time, universities were becoming more left-wing. Of course, liberal ideas have always had a home on college campuses, but they weren't just liberal, but leftist. As I've tried to document in previous commentaries, there's a striking difference between the two. A liberal would allow different points of view on campus. A leftist would prevent certain views from being expressed and shout down speakers they did not like and believed were not politically correct. Doesn't that sound like what is happening on campus today? Finally, the curriculum on many colleges became therapeutic. Instead, many courses merely attempted to provide reading and study skills that should have been developed in middle school and high school. Hanson writes that so many students left college mostly ignorant of the skills necessary to read, write, and argue effectively, lacking a general body of shared knowledge. He therefore concludes that a generation ignorant, arrogant, and poor is a prescription for social volatility. This is one major reason why we have so much division in America today. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. I want to give a shout out to my call screener and my producer and my associate producer. I want to say thanks. They do a fantastic job for my program here, and I'm a part of the team. We're all a team together, and it's wonderful to work with them. And so I just want to shout them out and say thanks. And so right now, it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest. She's been on the program a ton of times, always brings fantastic commentary and really the best that we can get on here. I love having good guests on. Lauren Enriquez, she's a public relations manager for Human Coalition. Lauren, thanks for joining in today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, I love having you on, and today is no different, although the topic is a bit somber. And I thought we could first go over the movie, and then I wanted to get your take on really the story du jour, which is that the protesters have turned violent, and now the leadership in the Democratic Party has also kind of jumped on board to say, yeah, this is what we want. But first, let's talk about it. The Gosnell movie, it's out already?
It is coming out on Friday, and actually my theater is going to start showing it on Thursday night, so there might be other theaters that are doing that as well.
Okay, check your local listings, folks. You can check your on your Fandango app or your Flix app on your phone, or you can just go straight to your movie's website and check and see when it's coming out. So let's talk about it. We all remember the story. Gosnell was a butcher. He actually was responsible for women dying. He kept a kind of a clinic of horrors, and he stored babies that he'd aborted in jars in the refrigerator and freezer there at the clinic. It was unclean, unsanitary, disgusting, deplorable conditions. What does the movie bring to the viewers to kind of help them understand what happened here in America, in modern day America?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the movie really does help to convey the fact that abortion is a genocide and that it is perpetrated by a really vicious ideology that is carrying out horrible acts of violence. So Gosnell is a good example of kind of the abortion industry at large. He's not necessarily an anomaly. He was a very odd individual personally, but Gosnell operated in a very impoverished area of Philadelphia for many decades. And during that time, as you stated, he basically ran a house of horrors. There were women who died as a result of his malpractice. He had a history of delivering children alive and then snipping their necks after they were born. That kind of shows you the schizophrenia of abortion, because we think of that as a horrific thing to do to a human being. And that is why he was eventually indicted and will spend his life in prison. But if he had killed those children inside of the womb, it would have been perfectly legal, and Gosnell would likely still be in operation today. So what the movie does is it's kind of set up as a Law and Order episode versus a horror film, because even though Gosnell's story is a horror story and it could have been made into a very gruesome, for adult eyes only type of story, Andrew Clavin, the writer, and the producer, Nick Searcy, and the directors got together and decided they wanted this to be a story that was accessible to a larger audience, to teenagers, to adults who wouldn't necessarily want to see a horror film. So they set it up like a courtroom drama, and they tell the story of Gosnell's practice and what eventually led to authorities taking action after knowing about what he was doing for decades, finally taking action. They tell that story in a non-gruesome, non-graphic way. Andrew Clavin did a great job with the script. I've seen the film already. It's very, very well done. Dean Cain plays one of the main characters. So they've got an all-star cast, a great writer, and they really did make the story something that is so somber and so horrifying. They made it accessible to a larger audience, and I hope people do go and see the film. You can find a theater that is showing it near you at gosnellmovie.com/theaters. So if your local theater isn't showing it, there might be one a little further down the road that is.
Okay, Lauren, so you know how difficult this subject matter is. And for people who are squeamish and don't go see R-rated films and aren't into horror movies, you did say it's presented as a Law and Order episode, which that's tolerable. Law and Order episodes are pretty tolerable. But have they been able to convey the story without it being so... I know it's a gruesome story, and to truthfully tell it, it is going to be gruesome. But is it still safe enough for a person who might be, squeamish or might have difficulty with gore and things like that? Can that person still tolerate the movie?
Yes, absolutely. It is set up like a Law and Order episode. There are bits of dialogue where the realities of what was found in Gosnell's clinic are kind of laid out, but there is nothing visually gory in the film. I think they did a very good job of keeping it palatable to a large audience. And I would really encourage people to take teenagers to see it, because this is something that our younger generation really needs to understand. So it's definitely accessible. If you do kind of want the horror story version of what Gosnell's practice was like, you can read the Pennsylvania grand jury report about what they found in Gosnell's clinic, or you can read the book, Gosnell, America's Biggest Serial Killer, which was kind of the precursor to the movie. Those two things definitely go through the gore in detail. But if you don't want to see that or hear about it, the movie will definitely be accessible to you.
Okay, thank you for that, because I know there are many listeners who would definitely go and see the movie, but they can't tolerate the gory aspects. And I'm one of those people. I don't watch the Walking Dead. I feel like real life is scary enough without watching horror movies. And I used to be able to watch it. I was in my 20s and my 30s. But I was joking around with some other moms, and I know that once you have kids and you get along in your marriage a few years, you're like, you know what? Real life's pretty scary. Like we have, people who are going through things that you're like, wow, that is so horrifying. And you want to like minimize your exposure to it. I'm glad that that's the case, because that means we can take our teenagers to see it and kind of, it's not like you want to make a family event out of it, but we kind of do, because we don't want to forget. That's what happens when you forget. In the Bible, when the people forget, when the Israelites would forget what they were taught, they would stray away, and then they'd be carried off into captivity, and they'd have all these problems. And for us, especially for the Christian community, I don't believe we fully understand what's going on with abortion in this country. We just know some numbers, and we know that it's bad. But this is one of the worst cases in the history of this country. And we've got to face it head on, so we know what to pray for. I really appreciate you seeing it first, so you could give us the synopsis, so we know we can head out and see it. So turning to the calls to violence that we're seeing from now Attorney General Eric Holder and others, Hillary Clinton, Cory Booker, Maxine Waters, Bernie Sanders. What do you make of? I mean, obviously they're doing this because they want to incite the base, but they're not inciting them to vote. They're inciting them to violence. What do you make of it?
Mm-hmm. You know, it might sound harsh, but to me, a party that endorses ripping preborn children out of their mother's wombs, I have no sense of shock over them calling people to lesser acts of violence at this point. I feel like this is just kind of true colors being shown. And hopefully the American public will be able to start to recognize that this is a party that endorses violence towards the most vulnerable members of our human family. And so we shouldn't be surprised when these other calls of violence are being given out. And, you know, we're actually seeing these calls to violence being taken up by particularly abortion advocates in Canada and in the United States. There's been an uptick in violence toward pro-life demonstrators and conservatives. So the calls to violence are already being taken up. And I think it was Rand Paul who said today or yesterday that he's actually worried that somebody is going to get assassinated in the near future, because that's the point to which we've escalated. But for me, I mean, I am a pro-life activist, so it always does come back to what did we expect when we set up a society where it was okay to violently kill the youngest and most vulnerable members of our society? Did we just expect everything else to remain peaceful? It doesn't really make sense.
No, it doesn't. And you make an excellent point about the abortion issue. And I've been knitting that together here on the show as often as possible to demonstrate that if you're okay with abortion, then you're pretty much okay with anything. You know, you can't say, well, I'm not okay with it, but I believe it should be legal because other people should be able to do it. That's like saying, I would never murder anyone, but I'm okay if other people who find, you know, people in their lives inconvenient, if they murder them, that's their right. That's the equivalent of what's being said. And I saw a lot of arguments. I think it was Steve King who sent out a tweet celebrating the installment of Justice Kavanaugh by saying that, you know, this is a victory. He's going to bring down Roe v. Wade, and it'll be a victory for babies. And he showed a picture of a sweet little baby, you know, obviously a baby, you know, not a baby in the womb. He said protecting these babies while they're in the womb. So he did specify the baby would still be in the womb and get protection. And the backlash online was so swift and fierce and ridiculous. And I just thought to myself, well, I mean, what is it that you think is in there, really? Like, what do you think, if it's a baby when it's coming out, when it gets on the outside, it's a baby. What do you think it is when it's in there? It's still a baby.
Yeah, this is why lately I've just been really focusing on this idea that there is a schizophrenic cognitive dissonance when it comes to abortion. We consider the child a child the moment it's born, even if it's born at 23 weeks gestation, when it's perfectly legal to kill in most states. We have this dissonance where it's almost like we've literally turned off parts of our brain because they're not consonant with the laws that we want to be in place. So hats off to Steve King for trying to draw attention to that. But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear about the backlash.
Yeah, it is a different world online. And I do find that regular people who are Democrats, they'll often express that they don't support abortion, but they do vote for Democrats because they support the other policies, the redistribution of wealth and, bigger government, et cetera, because they feel like that's the only way anything's going to get done. But there has to be a place where you can, I won't step past this line. It's your
Right.
point of no return. And it's one thing when you hear people who aren't Christians say that, well, abortion is just a necessary evil. It's another thing to hear Christians say it. People who, they're going to church, you've seen them. They're going to Bible study, you've seen them. And they're also voting for Democrats and advocating for abortion. That to me is kind of, like you said, it's a cognitive dissonance. And it's we
have to realize when we're sacrificing innocent people as collateral damage for other things that we want in our life.
Yeah, sex
and
on
that's
demand.
What's happening, I think.
Yeah. The whole sexual revolution and the idea that you just get to do whatever you want with your body and, repercussions don't matter. So I also wanted to touch base with you really quickly as we get to the end of this segment about praying for those who are placed in authority over us. The Bible calls for us to do that. And I know it's tough because a lot of people are feeling, kind of a justified anger against people in Washington, D.C. who are behaving outside of what they're being paid to do. But the Bible calls for us to pray for those who are placed in authority over us.
Absolutely. And at Human Coalition, where I work, we pray every day for our elected officials because, one, they are a reflection of America. Our elected officials were elected by us, and so we bear some of the responsibility for who we put into office. But once they're there, we have to continue to pray for them because it's not just the repercussions of their decisions are not just going to affect us. They're going to affect people who can't do anything for themselves. So we have to pray for them that they'll make the right decision on behalf of vulnerable populations like the preborn. And we take that calling very seriously. But it does require us, I guess, to humble ourselves a bit because a lot of times we do have a righteous anger toward the injustices that are being carried out by these elected officials themselves. So it's difficult, but maybe that can add to our prayer. That difficulty and that struggle can strengthen our prayer.
Amen to that. It's wonderful to hear that you get to do that at work, and I just think that's fantastic. I wanted to say thank you, Lauren, for coming on the show today. Lauren Enriquez, Public Relations Manager for Human Coalition. Could you give us the Gosnell Movie website again?
Sure. It's gosnellmovie.com, and you can find your theater at gosnellmovie.com/theaters.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for joining the show today, and talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Stacey. We'll talk to you.
All right. Perfect. So we're getting close to the end of this segment, and if you would like to call in and join the program before the end of the show, you're welcome to do so. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We're going to be talking about this list that I have of President Trump's accomplishments. What an interesting list it is. I gave you the first one. The first one is the water infrastructure tax. And this is, I'm sorry, President Trump's accomplishments, sure, but it's the 115th Congress. Tax reform. They reformed America's tax code for the first time in 31 years. Transforming the courts. Confirmed President Trump's judicial nominees at a historic pace. 69 in total, including Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. 26 circuit judges and 41 district court judges. Appropriations provided certainty to the American people with the restored regular order appropriations process by passing 9 of 12 appropriations bills through the Senate and sending 5 of those bills to the president's desk. They've enacted the most on-time appropriations bills in 22 years and funded 75% of the government on schedule. Now, they're calling that an accomplishment, but I don't know. Continuing to fund Planned Parenthood, I'm going to have to count that as a FAA bill. They passed a 5-year authorization bill to modernize airport infrastructure. Landmark opioid legislation, combating the nation's worst public health crisis with a package of proposals, including stopping fentanyl at the border and spurring development of new non-addictive painkillers. Funding to combat the opioid abuse. Drug price transparency. The Farm Bill. Defense. Veterans. Safe medications, regulatory reform, educating America's workforce, energy, banking reform, hope for the terminally ill, fighting sex trafficking, Obamacare by repealing the individual mandate, fighting terrorism, issuing sanctions against Iran, Russia, and North Korea, reining in the regulators, healthcare for children, and school safety. That's quite a list. We'll be back with more right after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Americans have watched in horror as Judge Brett Kavanaugh suffered a political hit job, a smear campaign intended to derail the nomination and energize Democratic voters. At first, it seemed to be working, but just 3 weeks later, voter enthusiasm on the political right is surging. People are engaged and outraged with righteous indignation at the low politics in evidence. God's word has a thing or two to say about setting traps to ensnare others. Don't do it. If you set a trap for others, you will get caught in it yourself. If you roll a boulder down on others, it will crush you instead. They spread a net for my feet. My soul was despondent. They dug a pit before me, but they themselves have fallen into it. He who leads the upright along the path of evil will fall into his own pit, but the blameless will inherit what is good. The trap set to destroy an innocent will only catch you. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Hello, I'm James. I couldn't stop the drug use. I had made it up in my mind that I wouldn't see 21. Teen Challenge has given me a hope. This is a place of restoration and a place of true freedom.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Just as David's mighty man Benaiah chased down a lion into a pit on a snowy day, Lion Chasers champions uncommon men and women of faith who are unafraid to stand up and speak truth to power in these dark and evil days. Never before has there been such a need for people of faith to draw a line in the sand with the sword of truth. Lion Chasers, the intersection of faith and public policy with Lonnie Poindexter. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is House Call for Health. Maybe there's a good reason for that old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Researchers say a chemical compound in apples, strawberries, and many other fruits and vegetables can slow down the aging process. It has to do with our cells. As we get older, our bodies become less able to clear out damaged cells that are no longer able to divide. And that can cause inflammation and tissue damage. But new research on mice finds that a chemical known as fisetin can help get rid of damaged cells, improving health and extending lifespan. The research published in the journal eBiomedicine says the chemical could help protect against strokes and Alzheimer's disease. But there has been no research done on humans, and while eating food containing fisetin is safe, some studies say there's a potential cancer risk if too much is consumed. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
What's your response to Hillary Clinton saying last night's swearing in of Judge Kavanaugh was a more political event than it was a national event?
I guess that's why she lost. She doesn't get it. She never did. I knew that a long time ago. Hillary never got it. That's why she lost.
Well, he does not pull any punches. That was President Trump. He was like, oh, that's why she lost. She didn't get it. He does not hesitate. The snapbacks are quick, and they're bruising. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's get into, there's a couple things. First off, we've mentioned a couple times over the past few days about this idea that Democrats are running on health care, even though they're the purveyors of Obamacare, but they want to preserve it because of pre-existing conditions is a bit of an issue. Well, now there's a little bit of chicanery going on up on Capitol Hill. You have Senate Democrats forcing centrist and vulnerable Republicans to take a tricky vote today aimed at forcing them to pick a side on the Trump administration's handling of Obamacare. The vote is on a discharge petition by Senator Tammy Baldwin to block health insurance companies from selling short-term plans, a type of coverage extended under President Trump as an alternative to Obamacare plans that Democrats and the healthcare law's allies deride as junk insurance. The legislative maneuver is part of Democrats' ongoing strategy to keep healthcare at the center of the conversation. People say they're for protecting people with pre-existing conditions. People say they're for making sure people have basic standards. They have an opportunity to prove it tomorrow, and that's Senator Brian D. Schatz, Democrat from Ohio. It's a long shot in the Senate where it has the support of 49 Democrats, but would need to pick up 2 Republican votes. But it would force all Senate Republicans once again to take a tough Obamacare vote. Senator Collins in Maine told reporters on Tuesday that she was undecided about it. Murkowski from Alaska, who opposed earlier GOP efforts to replace Obamacare, said she would be voting against it. Now, Dean Heller is a Republican from Nevada. He's one of the most vulnerable Republican incumbents, did not respond to requests for comments on this story. It would be blocked in the House, and Donald Trump has already said he would veto it in his role as president. So it has no chance of actually going anywhere, but that's the point of them bringing it forward, is to force them to go on the record so they can make ads about how Republicans want to steal your health care. And again, I have to say, the person who stole health care from Americans was Barack Obama and the Democrats who passed Obamacare. Obamacare didn't provide more options to people. It took options away. President Trump is trying to restore those by offering people the ability to get some of those plans back that were taken from them. And what we want is to see that actually happen. We want to see people have more options. And, you know, obviously here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, we also love MediShare. If you're in one of those Obamacare markets where you only have one offering and it's, you know, $5,000-$6,000 a month, or it's 2,000% higher than what you were paying before, MediShare is the option that will save you the most money, and you'll still have full coverage. So, you know, think about doing that. And then also breaking news is CVS thinking of becoming the future of healthcare with their just approved health insurance merger. So this is CVS, the pharmacy giant. They're actually purchasing, well, they have the Minute Clinics. First of all, if you're unaware, they have something called Minute Clinic where you can go and get a sports physical. If you have, you know, an eye infection or something, you know, anything that doesn't involve surgery or blood work, you can go to one of these clinics and they'll prescribe you medication and you'll be seen by a nurse practitioner. So now they're going to expand the types of healthcare that they offer because they're purchasing Aetna, the third largest health insurance company in the U.S., and they're claiming that their focus will be at the local and community level, taking advantage of our thousands of locations and touch points throughout the country to intervene with consumers to help predict and prevent potential health problems before they occur. Now, this is CVS Chief Executive Larry Merlo speaking to Washington Post. Now, CVS and Aetna had to sell Aetna's Medicare Part D prescription drug business to get the deal approved by the Department of Justice, and they'd announced their intention to purchase Aetna for nearly $70 billion in December of 2017. So it's an interesting development. You could almost see, because here in the St. Louis metro area, they have a number of urgent care centers that are mostly run by the hospitals here. They're like little clinics where you can go and get certain things seen. And you can get seen pretty quickly. So instead of going to the emergency room and racking up a huge bill, you can go to an urgent care center. It's more expensive than seeing your primary care doctor, but it's the same day. Literally, you can pick kids up from school who don't feel well, take them to the urgent care, and get them seen. So it's a convenient option. But could you not imagine CVS expanding their pharmacy locations to include a full-blown clinic instead of just 2 rooms, and offering a suite of options that are much more like a full-service medical clinic? If that's what they're thinking of doing, it's pretty brilliant. They're going to really put some competition back in healthcare. Let's go to the phones. We have Kevin in Texas. Kevin, or Tennessee. You guys, I have no idea. Kevin in Tennessee, thanks for calling the show.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well.
When I first started listening, you were talking about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an idea that I'd like to see happen. I'm a Yankee living down here in the South, and I got a friend he's also a Yankee, so we kind of speak our minds, don't really worry about what people think. And I don't know if you've ever gone on YouTube and looked at the pictures of aborted babies. It's absolutely horrific. It's disgusting. And if either one of us was a representative or a senator, would blow one of these pictures up, and the next time we were debating abortion, we'd just hold it up there and say, I challenge my colleagues to come up and defend this. This is what we're doing in this nation. And, of course, the left would be outraged. The media would be outraged. How dare you bring such a thing into the floor of the Senate or whatever. So they'd be making a point for us. Yes, it is horrific. That's why we should not be doing it as a nation, as a people. We have to stop this. Even if you don't bring God into the conversation, just the truth and the reality of what it is, when people see it, they're disgusted.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish one of our people would do that.
I got to say, you know what it reminds me of, Kevin? During the Kavanaugh hearings, when he was being, not the whole Christine Blasey Ford thing, although they did use visual aids for that too. During the parts where he was being questioned by the Democrats, they had all these lists of people who, these people are on the Federalist Society. Do you know them? These are some of the dark money funders. Have you ever met with these people? And they had these big blow-ups of slides and things like that. And so it's not unheard of for people on the floor of the Senate to use visual aids. I can tell you, talk about being triggered, Kevin, we ain't seen anything yet. I bet you they'd have protesters descend upon the senators who brought that. But what we need is senators who aren't worried about protesters and who aren't worried about people getting mad at them, who'll do exactly what you said. Defend this, Kamala Harris. Defend this, Mazie Hirono. You say you want people out of women's bodies. What is this? And how did it get like this? And why are you defending it? Fantastic suggestion. I'd love to see him do it. We have to send them maybe some phone calls up to their offices in D.C. and see if they're willing. Thanks for calling the show today. Yeah, it just seems like there are better tactics than what we're using right now, because right now we're still issuing these appropriations bills that fully fund Planned Parenthood. It's as if they have a stranglehold on the psyche of these people. So, again, I want to go back to Eric Holder. So the Washington Times is reporting on this. And it's just, it's pretty amazing. But again, and no offense to anybody who's going to get offended, but here we go. Did you know that Eric Holder's wife actually owns abortion clinics? She does. That's part of how they make their money as a family, is they run abortion clinics, 3 of them. And so that means, in addition to peddling abortion as elected official for him, or as an appointee when he was the Attorney General, he was also supporting abortion and profiting off of it because his wife runs clinics. So he says here, when they go low, we kick them. Former Attorney General Eric Holder said on Wednesday that Democrats need to be as tough as Republicans to win more elections. Michelle Obama always says, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them. And then the crowd cheered. Mr. Holder's comments came as he was speaking at an event to promote Stacey Abrams, the Democratic nominee for Georgia's gubernatorial race. He stressed that this new Democratic Party is proud as HE double hockey sticks and has to be willing to fight. The reality is, if we don't win, people that are less committed, less idealistic, less imbued with the values that make this nation really great will run this country. That's what Mr. Holder said. He said that if Ms. Abrams was elected governor, it would send a message to President Trump and get the nation to reject negativism and all the racial games they're trying to play. What racial games is he talking about? Here's the thing. If you're black in America right now, you already have the same kinds of problems that Hispanic Americans have and Asian Americans have and white Americans have and Muslim Americans and everybody else. We all have problems. This idea that somehow Donald Trump is inciting racism is simply not true. There's no proof for it other than, well, he said it and then the Washington Post reported on it, and so it's true. That doesn't make it true. So Republican Senator Cory Gardner pushed back against Mr. Holder's comments on Twitter, relating it to the violent threats aimed at his wife and other Republican colleagues. Mr. Gardner said, "That's not who we are." He actually tweeted that out to Holder. On Tuesday, former Secretary of State and presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, you already heard her comments from yesterday. She says we should return the Democrats to power and then we can get our civility back. And she says you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for. So what if we said that? Democrats want to destroy what we stand for. We stand for life. They want to destroy it. So, you can't be civil with that. Just imagine the backlash if President Trump said, well, we can't be civil with these Democrats. They want to destroy what we're building. When they're down low and they're protesting and they're hitting you and doing whatever, kick them. Can you imagine the backlash? Can you imagine what Jim Acosta, he'd probably faint. And then when he woke back up, he'd start talking incessantly about the double standard and about how violent, the Democrats say the Republicans are. But where is the Republican violence? And don't tell me it's at the border. That whole child detention thing is a function of bringing your child into the country illegally. It's not hard or mean or shocking for us to tell the truth about that. In fact, speaking of the border, here's some shocking information for you. Remember the wall that we were told was too expensive for us to build as Americans? $20 billion. Now, these are the same people who they don't mind spending money on almost anything except national defense. But a border wall, well, that's a bridge too far. It's too expensive. It's not something we can afford. Well, it turns out we're paying more to cover the cost of illegal immigrants giving birth in the U.S. than Congress plans to give President Trump in border wall funding. This is according to an explosive new analysis of Census Bureau data. The new report reveals that women in the United States illegally had 297,000 children in 2014 at a cost of $2.4 billion, which is $800 million more than the Senate has approved for Trump's border wall this year. It's actually enough to pay for the border wall construction for 10 years. Which I'm also not understanding why we can't just spend $20 billion all in one fell swoop on the wall. We're spending all this money on other programs. Why can we not just spend the $20 billion all at once? Because Republicans don't want to. Remember, the Republicans are in charge. If they wanted to, they would. So then there's this crazy chart that they have here at the Washington Examiner, and the chart shows the 50 largest metro areas in the United States, and it's broken down by immigrant share of all births and illegal immigrant share of all births. In San Jose, California, over 55% of all the births are immigrants. The illegal immigrants are having 15% of the babies. So the top places where illegals are having the most babies and immigrants are San Jose, Miami, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, Houston, San Diego, Seattle, Boston, Las Vegas, Sacramento, Dallas, Riverside, San Bernardino, Orlando, Chicago, Austin, and Raleigh, North Carolina. The places where the immigrant share of all births and illegal immigrant share of all births are the lowest are Pittsburgh, Birmingham, Alabama, St. Louis, Missouri, Cincinnati, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, Cleveland, Ohio, Kansas City, Missouri, Virginia Beach, Virginia, and Memphis, Tennessee. Build a wall. Come on, Republicans. Get on it. Let's get it done. All right. Good night from the Heartland. God bless you. Let's pray for those who are placed in authority over us, and have a fantastic night.